this next piece of gameplay, prototype that I've developed, is very experimental. I was curious what I could do with this, and I'm not convinced it will end up being a final mechanic in my game, but at the very least it's kind of just a fun little behavior set to play around with. I've split up my screen so that we can see what happens when I press run. I have this big wall of green blocks appear that I've called a field and grass. And under my prefabs, I have this block that's called grass. And if I look at it, these are all just individual blocks that have been placed automatically in the game in a certain range. If I click on my field, I see that I have a length and width, and I'll show you how this works. Maybe I just want to make this 10 by 10, and I hit run, and it should, based off of where my field is placed, I have this empty field placing the blocks in a 10 by 10 grid around it, automatically built off of the sizes. What I have it for, 20 by 22, I believe. So if I run it again this way, I've just got those numbers for, oh, I was in play mode, 20 by 22. The numbers that fit exactly in this space, and I've had kind of a generalized auto creation system that kind of fills us whatever kind of dimensions I want automatically with these blocks. And what I've created in terms of the actual functionality for the game is I've injected a little bit of my range detection with some physics applications. So let me just blast through my wall here, and I'll show you what happens when I get close to these. I see that I've highlighted that they're close, but I also have this kind of like force field effect around me, that when I get close and move towards them, I kind of apply a force in the direction that I'm moving. And I can start to feel kind of like a superhero in a way. Maybe I have the force or something, and I can start to push and apply forces as I move around. It could simply be a mechanic that allows me to kind of move through a busy area, or maybe I'm trying to actually wrangle these blocks into a certain spot. Maybe that's actually a mechanic we can play around with in the next video potentially, where we're trying to get as many of these blocks as we can into a little corralled place. So I get a score for actually moving these together, kind of like I'm a border collie with a group of sheep. So these blocks are my sheep or something like that. However, it's just kind of a fun way of playing around with physics using this collision system. And if I click back on my player, we'll see that this objects in range list snags all of these pieces of grass as I get close to them, and then it does something to them, and then they get scattered away. So the list is constantly updating, and I've done all of this behavior through this sphere target management. Let's take a peek at how this works. This is actually not too challenging. First, we're going to check out the prefab of grass and see what's attached to this here, and we simply just have our normal colliders and a rigid body and a nice color applied to it. So this object is actually really simple. It isn't actually doing anything on its own. Everything happens inside of here. On trigger enter. Inside of this on trigger enter, I have this first condition where inside of it I do all of that interactability changing and adding it to my list and rendering the color changes. But I've added this little piece of code where I simply just look, in addition to these other checks that I'm doing, so this still applies in my grass, that color change. So when I get close, the grass changes color, just like everything else in my game. But in addition, if I have a special case of the tag of these objects being grass, which I've made sure my prefab has this time, there it is, then I also am going to snag that rigid body component, and I'm going to add a force, which is relative to the direction that my character is moving, to transform in the forward direction the blocks at some force value. So it's kind of just this little aura of force that I apply. In this case, I don't even need an on-trigger exit condition because I just want that force to be applied and then have them move on their own. And all it took to have all those layers of complex interactions where I had like, what was it, 20 by 22, like 400 and some odd different objects all being able to be interacted with in the same way. We're just adding a little bit of code. Because I built this larger system, it's really easy to inject a cool extra piece of mechanic in place here. And maybe you think that that mechanic feels kind of clunky, maybe you think it's awesome. I'm just in my prototype stage, trying out some ideas, seeing what looks cool, feels good. I definitely think that the ability to have some kind of a force field for certain types of object, or applying a force at a distance, telekinesis maybe, is a cool mechanic that I might play around with. And in the next video, I think we just might look at a way that we can take advantage of this system to make a little bit of gameplay as we wrap up this section with a little bit of content on user interface.